I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anybody except the Queen being there.
The corridors of Buckingham Palace have seen their share of royal tempests, but none quite like this. In a decision as cold as the marble beneath his throne, King Charles has drawn a brutal line between blood and loyalty. Overnight, Camilla's family, once embraced behind palace walls, found themselves cast out, stripped of privileges, and erased from royal circles. Witnesses say she collapsed in anguish, her cries echoing just beyond the throne room.
I'm completely hopeless at it. I was a really bad actor at school, and I've never been able to master the art of mimicry. But
what did they do to deserve such punishment? Stay with us, because behind this royal purge lies a story the Crown tried to bury. The morning everything changed at Buckingham Palace. It was just past 7 a.m. on a crisp London morning in early July 2025, and Buckingham Palace was wrapped in a deceptive stillness. Rays of sunlight poured through the towering windows, casting sharp streaks of gold across the marble floors. Queen Camilla's heels clicked softly against the polished stone as she took her usual morning walk, an unspoken tradition she'd held on to for years. These quiet strolls, away from the cameras and protocol, were her time to breathe, to center herself before the day's formalities unfolded. But something was wrong. The air carried an unfamiliar heaviness, a silence that didn't feel serene but strained. The palace staff, always discreet, seemed distant. Conversations hushed the moment she entered a room. Their nods, once accompanied by warm smiles, now felt mechanical. She searched their faces for reassurance, but all she found were shadows of unease. Camilla told herself it was nothing. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe nerves. Maybe the lingering pressure of back-to-back diplomatic events. But deep down, she knew better. Near the base of the grand staircase, Margaret, her trusted secretary of over 25 years, appeared. Her face was pale, her movements uncertain. In her trembling hands, she held a sealed envelope. "Your Majesty," Margaret said gently, voice barely audible. "His Majesty requests your immediate presence in the private study. He said it's a matter of the highest importance." Camilla froze. King Charles rarely used that kind of formality with her, not through staff and never through sealed letters. Their marriage, despite the scrutiny, had been rooted in genuine closeness. They'd built something durable over the years, a shared rhythm, a way of speaking without speaking. But this wasn't them. As Camilla walked the familiar path to Charles's study, the energy shift became undeniable. Palace guards stood with military stiffness, their gazes locked forward like statues. Staff members avoided eye contact. The whispers she couldn't hear felt louder than the sounds around her. And the further she went, the more Buckingham Palace, her home, felt like a stranger. She reached the heavy oak doors to the study. 2 royal guards flanked them, an unusual sight. This room had always been sacred, their retreat, a place where they could drop their titles and just be. One guard stepped forward, opened the door, and announced, "Her Majesty, the Queen." Inside, King Charles stood behind his desk, still, formal and unreadable. Legal documents were spread neatly across the surface. Several advisors lined the room, silent and watchful. The study, once filled with warmth and private memories, now felt cold, sterile, prepared. And can what unfolded in that cold, silent study shatter royal bonds forever? Keep watching. This is where loyalty meets its breaking point. The crown comes first. The study had never felt this cold before. It wasn't the weather outside. London's summer had broken through the clouds that morning of July 2025. But something heavier, thicker, almost invisible, had seeped into the walls. Camilla remained standing. She didn't need a chair. She needed answers. and she could feel them coming like a storm. Charles stood across from her, still silent, still staring at the document before him as though it might rewrite itself if he looked long enough. She had known this man for most of her life, loved him through decades of public judgment, endured scandal and scrutiny by his side, and yet now he felt miles away, not a husband, not a partner, but something else entirely. She watched his hand as it hovered above the document. It trembled slightly. That, more than anything, made her heart race, because Charles didn't shake. Then came the sound, his throat clearing, loud and jarring in the quiet. His voice followed, but it wasn't the voice he used when speaking to her. It was formal, deliberate, almost rehearsed. "Camilla," he began, his eyes finally meeting hers. "The Palace Security Service has concluded an internal investigation. What they've uncovered requires immediate action." She blinked. "Investigation?" Her lips parted, but no words came. She couldn't guess where this was going, only that it was heading somewhere dark. Charles' fingers moved the paper slightly in her direction. Her name was printed neatly at the top, beneath the seal of the monarchy. A royal document, not a letter, not a note, not a warning. He continued, voice steady but struggling to remain detached.
"I am deeply aware of this great inheritance and of the duties and heavy responsibilities of sovereignty, which have now passed to me.
There is evidence implicating members of your immediate family in activities that threaten the security and reputation of the crown." Time stopped. She couldn't breathe. Her family? She'd always been aware of their imperfections, some attention-seeking behavior, the occasional tabloid embarrassment. But this was something else. "What are you saying?" she asked, stepping forward. "What activities? What are you accusing them of?" Charles didn't answer. Instead, a man to his right, a legal advisor in a charcoal suit, spoke up, tall, cold-eyed, the kind of man who dealt in consequences, not emotions. "Your Majesty," he said to Camilla, with unnerving calm, "there have been multiple incidents, unauthorized contacts with foreign nationals, dubious financial transactions, and attempts to profit, directly and indirectly, from association with the royal institution." Camilla's mouth went dry. She thought of her sister, her children, her nieces and nephews. None of them is perfect, but none of them are traitors. "We can fix this privately," she said firmly, her voice hardening. "This doesn't need to become a royal decree." But Charles was no longer pleading. His eyes had changed, icy and final. "The decision has been made," he said, almost quietly. "So would you dare stand against a king whose icy gaze declares the verdict sealed? Stay glued. This scandal shatters the crown. The family scandal that shook the crown." The air in the study felt thinner now, as if it too had turned against her. Queen Camilla sat frozen, her back stiff, her hands trembling ever so slightly in her lap. The ornate room, usually a haven of comfort and shared laughter, now held the weight of betrayal and impossible decisions. The date, July 2nd, 2025, was one she would never forget. King Charles's voice pierced the silence. "Your son," he began, not unkindly, but with the careful detachment of a man who had rehearsed every word. "Tom, the reviews, the television deals, the celebrity chef persona, it's all built on deception." Camilla's breath caught in her throat. She had feared this day. She'd seen the warning signs.
We cannot ignore the symptoms and should act now to restore the health of the planet before it is too late.
Quiet rumors in the tabloids, the guarded looks from palace aides. But she had hoped they would pass, as so many scandals did. Still, the truth had a way of finding its way into these walls, no matter how high the gates stood. Tom Parker Bowles. Her son, a respected figure in the culinary world. But behind the glowing reviews and glossy appearances was something darker. A quiet arrangement with business partners who had used his royal ties for power and profit. Private deals, backdoor agreements, invitations bought, not earned. "Charles, I can explain—" "No," the king interrupted, his voice firm. "There's more." Camilla's eyes widened. "Laura," her daughter. "The charity," Charles continued. "The donations meant for children. Do you have any idea where some of that money has gone?" Camilla's hands clenched the velvet arms of her chair. Her daughter's charity work had always made her proud. School visits, fundraisers, warm photos with underprivileged children. Surely there had been no foul play. Charles slid a thick folder across the desk. Camilla opened it with hesitant fingers. The first page, a bank statement showing large transfers from Laura's charity account to an offshore fund in the Cayman Islands. The second, a photograph. Tom accepting an envelope behind the back entrance of a Mayfair restaurant. The third, a transcript of a recorded phone call. Laura's voice, unmistakably hers, casually discussing how to maximize value by leaning into her royal ties. "This can't be real," Camilla whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "They would never. Not like this." "I've had investigators working for 6 months," Charles said gently. "I wanted them to be wrong, Camilla, but they weren't." She looked up at him. Her face was pale, her voice breaking. "What are you saying?" Charles turned to the tall windows overlooking the palace lawns, where tourists were already gathering, unaware that history was unraveling just beyond the glass. "It means I have to choose between you and the monarchy." So how did one shattering choice between love and monarchy ignite a betrayal for the ages? Stay tuned. History is about to bleed. Betrayal in the bloodline. The quiet in the study had become unbearable. It wasn't silence anymore, it was something else. A choking stillness, thick with betrayal, curling through the drapes and up the paneled walls. July 2025 would not just mark a crisis in the monarchy. It was the day Camilla's understanding of family collapsed. She gripped the edge of Charles's desk, knuckles white, struggling to steady her breath. What had begun as allegations against her children was now spiraling into something far deeper, something darker. The lead royal advisor stepped forward again, papers in hand, his tone clinical, almost detached. "There have been attempts," he said, "to sell detailed information about the royal family's private activities to foreign media outlets." Camilla blinked, disbelieving. Phone records, financial logs, they all paint the same picture. Leaked schedules, whispered conversations, casual remarks turned into marketable secrets. The words struck like blows, each one louder than the last. She thought back. Harmless chats over wine, venting during holidays, comforting relatives who always seemed to have just one more problem. Had all that been collected, packaged, and sold? Her throat tightened. "Who?" she whispered, though part of her already knew. Charles didn't respond at first. When he did, his voice carried the weight of shame. "Thomas," he said. "Son." It felt like the floor dropped beneath her. Thomas Parker Bowles, her son. He had been struggling for years. Bad investments, mounting debts, always in need of help. She had loaned him money quietly, never judging, always hoping. She had trusted him, and now, this? "The investigation," another advisor added, flipping open a second file, "revealed more than just Thomas. Several extended family members, cousins, even a few close friends, used their proximity to you as a gateway into the palace." The walls of the study felt like they were closing in, but the worst was yet to come. "We had to act now," the advisor continued, "because intelligence suggests a major international exposé is imminent. It could include highly sensitive material. security routines, travel details, even footage. Camilla finally let her body fall into the chair she had refused earlier. Her strength had vanished. It wasn't just the betrayal that devastated her, but the realization that this had been happening for months, maybe longer. And no one had told her. Not even Charles. Her eyes narrowed. She turned to him, her voice trembling but edged with something sharp. "How long?" she asked. "How long have you known this? How long have you been preparing for this moment, while pretending we were fine?" Charles looked away. He didn't answer, and that silence told her everything. And how did 3 months of royal silence shatter Camilla's world beyond repair? Stay connected to your screen for the truth. The 3 months of silence. The room felt colder now, though the sun still streamed through the palace windows as it had earlier that day. July 2025. The same day everything Camilla thought was secure began to unravel. She sat motionless, every word from Charles echoing like a verdict through the quiet, grand study that had once been their sanctuary. But now it felt like a courtroom. And she, the accused by association. Charles's voice, firm but quieter now, offered a timeline that made her heart ache more than the content of the investigation itself. "The surveillance started 6 months ago," he said. "Routine security sweeps picked up odd patterns in phone calls, emails, too many red flags. I was briefed on the findings 3 months ago. I waited. I hoped it wasn't true." 3 months. For 3 months he had known, while they attended state dinners, while they waved from palace balconies. They held hands at public events, smiled for photographers, and exchanged whispered jokes behind closed doors. He had known. "You carried this while lying beside me at night?" Camilla said, barely able to form the words. "While we planned events, toasted diplomats, laughed at the press, you knew all of this, and you said nothing?" Charles looked away. "You made this decision without me," she said, her voice shaking now, not just with rage, but with heartbreak. "You didn't give me a chance, not to speak with them, not to fix it. You just erased them." The weight of it crushed her. No more birthdays, no Christmas dinners, no small familiar moments with her brother, no spontaneous calls from her children. Her family, people who had held her up during the worst storms of public disgrace. Long before she wore a crown, were now written off as national threats. She was expected to walk away from them, like they were staff, dismissed at the end of the day. Tears pressed at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "What do I tell them?" she asked. "That they're banned from my life? That the Queen of England no longer has a family because the risk to the crown is too great?" Charles shifted in his seat, finally showing a flicker of the man she once married. "They'll be contacted, given a full explanation. This wasn't personal, Camilla. It was about protecting the monarchy." She let the words sink in. Protecting the monarchy. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "So this is what we are now? A marriage governed by security reports and council meetings? Are my relationships now subject to clearance levels?" The question hung in the air like smoke, impossible to ignore. What did that chilling question truly reveal about a marriage bound by duty, not love? Keep watching. This truth will shake the crown itself. The crown over blood. The tension in Buckingham Palace that day was impossible to ignore. A single decision had done more than shake the halls of tradition. It had pierced through the very heart of Queen Camilla's identity. Behind the polished doors of the private royal study, the air felt heavy, thick with silence that didn't offer peace, only pressure. She stood still, emotionally wounded, as one of Charles's younger advisors, barely old enough to understand the scars left by betrayal, spoke carefully, but firmly. "Your Majesty, there's one more item on the agenda. The communications office needs a public statement explaining your family's absence from future royal events. The media is already asking questions. Camilla blinked in disbelief. Her fingers curled slightly, almost trembling. You want me to help stage a public cover-up? To explain away the people I love as if they're footnotes in a press release? Not a cover-up, the advisor replied quickly. A carefully worded explanation, something about private circumstances and a temporary reduction in public visibility. It protects your family's privacy and the monarchy's image. Their words sounded clean, too clean, sanitized. But what they were proposing wasn't protection, it was erasure. Camilla pictured the tabloids, the headlines, the snide speculation. Her brother's name was tossed around in whispers, and her nieces and nephews turned into symbols of scandal overnight. And all the while, she'd be expected to smile, wave, and move on. She glanced at Charles, who had remained quiet. "What about me?" she asked, her voice cracking just enough to reveal the depth of her heartbreak. "What happens to me in all of this? Do I just pretend half my life never existed? That I was born wearing pearls and protocol?" Finally, Charles moved, slowly, deliberately, away from his desk. For a split second, she thought he might reach out to her, bridge the gap. Instead, he stopped short, his arms remaining stiff at his sides. His expression carried sympathy, but not enough to challenge the crown. "You are the Queen of England," he said softly, and in that title, every ounce of emotion drained from the room. "Your role demands sacrifice. That's the price of monarchy, even when that price is personal." The words were meant to reassure, but to Camilla, they landed like judgment. She did not feel like a partner, but like a pawn, a figure being moved, strategically, coldly, for the sake of a larger, colder game. "I used to think this role meant I could help people," she whispered, her voice sharpening with pain and fire, "that I could humanize this place. But all it's done is hollow me out." Across the room, Charles said nothing, and with every second of silence, Camilla felt the man she had once loved slipping further behind the mask of the crown. But how did Charles's silence shatter Camilla's heart, sealing her fate in the crown's shadow? Stay with us. This is where royalty turns ruthless. Gilded Captivity. July 2025. The day the gilded walls of Buckingham Palace felt less like a fortress of prestige and more like the bars of a cage. Camilla sat motionless at first, her back straight, her eyes fixed on a single point in the richly carpeted floor. The reality pressed down on her until it felt almost physical. The crown on her head wasn't a symbol of power anymore. It was a chain. Her voice cut through the stagnant air with sudden urgency. "I want to speak with them," she said, startling several of the gathered advisors. "Before anything is made official, I want to talk to my brother, to my family. I deserve to know what happened, from them. Not through reports, not through you." The chief legal advisor didn't even glance at Charles before responding, his tone smooth and unyielding. "I'm afraid that's not possible, Your Majesty. Any direct contact at this stage could be interpreted as an attempt to interfere. With the security review underway, all communication must go through official channels." Camilla's head snapped up, her voice edged with disbelief. "You're telling me I can't even call my own brother? That I can't speak to my family?" "That is correct," he replied evenly. "Until the assessment is concluded and the agreements are signed, direct contact is prohibited." The words were clean, precise, and merciless. The air in the room thickened, laced with the cold efficiency of bureaucratic power. Camilla realized with a slow, nauseating certainty that she wasn't just Queen of England in this moment. She was also its prisoner. Protocols and security measures had stripped her down from a human being with bonds of love to a figurehead treated as a possible risk. She stood abruptly, the sharp scrape of her chair against the polished floor startling everyone. "I need air," she said, her voice trembling as she strode toward the door. Before she could reach it, a guard shifted, barely, but enough to block her path. "Your Majesty," came Charles's voice from behind her, heavy with something that might have been regret. "You'll need to remain in the palace for the next few days. For security reasons." Her eyes widened. "You're keeping me prisoner in my own home?" "Not a prisoner," Charles said quickly, though the hollowness in his tone betrayed him. "A precaution. We can't risk unauthorized contact right now." "How long?" she asked, the question barely audible. Charles consulted his advisors in muted voices. 1 week, perhaps 2. 14 days. 2 weeks in which strangers would reach her family before she could. 2 weeks where elegant rooms would be her world, filled with people yet steeped in the deepest loneliness she had ever known. And how could 14 days of gilded isolation shatter her spirit so completely? Keep watching. This is where the true darkness begins. The death of warmth. They stood around her like architects admiring the completion of a cold, immaculate structure, pleased, perhaps even proud, at how neatly their plan had unfolded. In their eyes, it was a precise operation, a necessary maneuver for the preservation of the crown. In Camilla's eyes, it was the dismantling of her life, brick by brick. "I understand," she said at last, though her voice carried the quiet strain of someone holding back a tidal wave. "I understand that you think this is necessary, that you believe you're protecting something bigger than me. But know this. What you've done here today will change me forever." Her gaze cut through the room. "The woman you knew, the queen who tried to bring warmth and humanity to this place, she is dying in this room." Across the desk, Charles flinched, a shadow of pain flickering across his face. But he didn't move toward her. The king had made his choice, and the man she married seemed nowhere to be found. "I will obey your rules," Camilla went on, her voice sharpening. "I'll stay here. I won't call my family. I'll play whatever public role you need to keep the crown polished and untarnished. But I will not pretend to agree. And I will not forgive." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. The advisors left first, shuffling out with their files and careful nods, leaving Charles behind his desk, as though pinned there by his own guilt. When he finally spoke, his voice softened, almost pleading. "You must know. This wasn't a decision made lightly. There are real threats to national security. I couldn't ignore them." She looked at him with eyes that seemed to have aged a decade in minutes. "So when it came down to me or the institution, you chose the institution." The words landed like a verdict. He reached for her arm. She pulled away sharply. "Don't," she said, her voice breaking. "Don't comfort me after this." Margaret, her secretary, appeared in the doorway clutching a folder. The euphemism, "current circumstances," hit harder than the news itself. "Cancel everything," Camilla said. Charles gave the nod of final authority, and the last pretense of her independence vanished. Through the window, the garden stretched out under the golden light of late afternoon. Once, she had pictured her family there, laughing. Now she saw only the space where they would never be. "They'll think I abandoned them," she whispered. "They'll understand," Charles replied, though neither of them believed it. But what do you think truly broke Camilla the most? The ruthless political maneuver that severed her ties to her family, or the cold realization that Charles chose the crown over her? We'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.